walk together in hope. The evening slowly descended over the small town of San Gabriel. In the central square, an elderly priest named Matteo calmly watched the passers-by. Beside him, a young man named Andrés, his face marked by hopelessness, kicked a stone aimlessly. "Father Matteo, have you ever felt like everything is lost?" Andrés asked in a muted voice. The priest looked at him with compassion and gestured for him to sit beside him on the wooden bench. "Andrés, life gives us trials that make us feel alone, but God never abandons us. Many years ago, I also felt the same way." Andrés lifted his gaze with curiosity. He had never imagined that the elderly priest could have faced difficult moments. "What happened, Father?" Matteo sighed and began his story. "When I was young, I suffered a great loss. My family lost everything in a crisis, and I felt that God had forgotten us. I walked aimlessly, just like you now, not knowing what to do." Andrés frowned. His problems also seemed insurmountable. His father had lost his job, his mother was sick, and he himself felt incapable of changing his fate. "And what did you do?" he asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Matteo smiled gently. "I learned that we shouldn't walk alone. God calls us to walk together, in hope, trusting in His plan, even when we don't always understand it." Andrés remained silent. Something in those words began to sink into his heart. Andrés looked down, processing the priest's words. For weeks, he had felt like he was carrying his cross alone, not knowing who to turn to. "How did you know that God was with you?" he asked in a faint voice. Matteo intertwined his hands and gazed toward the horizon. "I didn't know right away. In my pain, I withdrew from everything and everyone. But one day, an old pastor found me sitting by a river, just like you now, lost in my thoughts. He spoke to me about hope, the kind that isn't based on what we see, but on what we believe." Andrés raised his eyes. "And what did he say?" Matteo smiled nostalgically. He said, "God never leaves His own alone, but when the road is difficult, He sends others to hold us up. You are not alone, my son. Let us walk together in hope." Andrés felt a lump in his throat. For a long time, he had believed he had to face his problems alone. But maybe God was sending him help through Father Matteo. "And what did you do after hearing that?" "I let myself be guided. I didn't have the strength to go on by myself, but the pastor and others reached out to me. Little by little, I learned that faith is not a solitary journey. When two or more walk together in Christ, the burden lightens." Andrés sighed. "I don't know if I can do it. I feel so tired." Matteo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. Come on, Andrés. Let us walk together in hope." For the first time in a long while, Andrés felt a glimmer of light in his heart. Andrés and Father Matteo stood up. The sunset painted the sky with golden and orange hues, as if God Himself were wrapping the town in a warm embrace. "Where are we going?" Andrés asked, with a hint of uncertainty. Matteo smiled. "We are going to visit a family that needs help. Sometimes, when we think we have nothing to give, that's when we can offer the most." Andrés frowned but followed the priest through the narrow cobblestone streets. They reached a small house with worn-out walls. From the door, the sound of children's laughter and a soft voice singing could be heard. Matteo knocked gently, and a woman with a tired face, but a sincere smile, greeted them. "Father Matteo, what a joy to see you. Maria, let me introduce you to Andrés. Today he has decided to walk in hope, and I thought we could do it together." Andrés looked at the woman with curiosity, then glanced inside the house. In one corner, 3 children played with makeshift toys, but their faces reflected genuine happiness. "Please, come in," invited Maria. "I don't have much, but I can offer you some bread and hot tea." Andrés felt a lump in his throat. He knew his family was going through hardships, but this woman, despite her poverty, had a joy and peace that he didn't understand. They sat around a simple table, and while Maria served the tea, Father Mateo spoke tenderly. "Maria, tell Andrés how you manage to keep hope every day." The woman smiled as she looked at her children. "It's not easy, but I've learned that God never leaves us alone. There are days when I don't know what to feed them, but something always happens. A neighbor brings us bread, someone gives us clothes, and every night we thank God for whatever we had that day." Andrés felt a jolt in his heart. His own family had more resources than this woman, but he had spent weeks feeling desperate and alone. "And have you never been afraid?" he asked sincerely. Maria nodded. "Yes, many times, but then I remember that God provides, and that we don't walk alone. He always places people on our path to help us move forward." Father Mateo looked at Andrés with tenderness. "Do you see, son? God calls us to support one another. When we help each other, hope grows and strengthens us." Andrés lowered his gaze, thoughtful. Something inside him was beginning to change. Andrés took a sip of the hot tea and felt the warmth spread through his body. But what comforted him most wasn't the drink, but the warmth of that family. "I had never thought of it that way," he said softly. "I always thought hope was just waiting for something good to happen. But you all do something else. You keep going even when things are tough." Maria smiled gently. "Hope isn't just waiting, Andrés. It's trusting that God has a plan and continuing to walk, even when we don't see the end of the road." Father Mateo nodded. When Jesus called his disciples, he didn't promise them an easy path. He told them there would be difficulties, but not to be afraid because he would be with them. Faith doesn't spare us from problems, but it gives us the strength to face them. Andrés watched the children, who were now drawing in an old notebook. Their laughter filled the house with sincere joy. "I've spent weeks feeling alone," Andrés confessed. "My father lost his job, my mother is sick, and I didn't know what to do. I thought God had forgotten us." Maria took his hand with affection. "God never forgets us, son. Sometimes we just need to open our eyes to see that he is already working around us." Father Mateo stood up with a smile. "Andrés, today you've taken an important step. You've seen hope in action. But the next step is even greater, sharing that hope with others." Andrés frowned. "How?" Mateo looked at Maria and then at the children. "You said your father is out of work. Perhaps we can help him. Maybe we know someone who needs his skills. And your mother, we could find a way for her to get the care she needs." Andrés felt his heart beat faster. For so long, he had felt paralyzed by fear and hopelessness. But now he understood he wasn't alone. "Do you really think we can do something?" Maria smiled at him. "Let's walk together in hope, Andrés." The young man felt, for the first time in a long time, that his burden was lighter. "All right," he said with determination. "Let's move forward." The next morning, Andrés woke up with a different feeling in his chest. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel the weight of hopelessness when he opened his eyes. He got up early and went to the church, where Father Mateo was waiting for him. "I'm glad to see you, son," said the priest with a smile. "Today we begin our mission." "Mission?" asked Andrés, curious. Mateo nodded. "God calls us to be instruments of hope. We're going to find help for your father and your mother, and at the same time we'll see how we can support Maria and her children." Andrés felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He wasn't used to asking for help, but something inside him told him not to be afraid. They walked together through the village, visiting small shops and workshops. At Don Esteban's carpentry, an older man with hands weathered from work, they found an opportunity. "Your father is a good man," said Don Esteban. I know his work and he's always been honest. I just need someone to help me in the workshop. Andrés felt a lump in his throat. Could it be true? Would you really hire him? Tell him to come see me tomorrow, said the carpenter with a smile. When someone is willing to move forward, God opens doors. Father Mateo placed a hand on Andrés' shoulder. God works through people. Today you've seen how hope strengthens when we walk together. But the day wasn't over yet. At the village pharmacy, they spoke with the owner, a kind-hearted woman named Dona Isabel. I've heard about your mother's illness, Andrés, she said gently. I don't have much, but I can help with some medicine and see how we can get what she needs. Andrés could hardly believe it. The hopelessness that had consumed him for weeks was fading. Thank you so much. Father Mateo smiled. Do you see, son? Faith calls us to trust and walk together. God never abandons us, but sometimes we have to take the first step. Andrés felt his eyes fill with tears, but this time, they weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude. Andrés returned home with his heart pounding. As soon as he crossed the door, he found his father sitting at the table with a lost look and his mother lying on the bed with a pale face. Dad, I have good news, he said with contained excitement. His father lifted his gaze, tired. Good news? He asked incredulously. Andrés nodded enthusiastically. I spoke to Don Esteban, the carpenter. He needs help in his workshop and wants to see you tomorrow. He says he knows your work and trusts you. His father's eyes opened in surprise. Esteban? But I didn't even ask him for work. You didn't have to, Andrés replied. God put us in his path. The man ran a hand over his face, as if making sure he wasn't dreaming. Son, I don't know what to say. Andrés smiled warmly and turned toward his mother. And you, Mom, you're not alone either. Dona Isabel from the pharmacy wants to help with your treatment. It won't solve everything, but it's a start. His mother took his hand with effort. God has heard our prayers. His father stood up and hugged his son tightly. Andrés felt how the weight of the anguish he had carried for weeks dissipated in that moment. I didn't know how we were going to move forward, whispered his father, but now I understand that we were never alone. Father Mateo, who had been waiting at the entrance of the house, stepped forward and spoke serenely. God always provides, but he also calls us to trust and act. Sometimes, faith requires us to take a step in the dark before we see the light. Andrés nodded, fully understanding the message. And when we walk together, hope becomes stronger. The priest smiled with pride. That's right, son. In that moment, Andrés knew his life had changed forever. That night, for the first time in a long time, Andrés' family had dinner together with hearts full of hope. They didn't have a feast, just a simple plate of bread and hot soup, but the peace they felt made it seem like a banquet. Tomorrow I'll go see Don Esteban, his father said with determination, not just for the job, but because I want to thank him in person. His mother nodded with a weak smile, but full of love. And I'll keep fighting. God has been good to us, and now I know he never abandoned us. Andrés felt a warmth in his chest hearing those words. Just a few days ago, he had believed everything was lost. But now he understood that hope is not simply waiting for something to happen, but trusting in God and moving forward, step by step. The next morning, he and Father Mateo returned to Maria's house. The children ran to greet them, laughing and hugging him joyfully. Andrés, exclaimed one of the little ones. Mom told us you helped your family. Maria greeted them with a warm smile. God works in wonderful ways, she said. Yesterday I got a call from the bakery in the village. They need someone to help in the mornings, and they offered me the job. Andrés opened his eyes in amazement. That's incredible. Father Mateo looked up at the sky and smiled. When we walk together in hope, God multiplies the blessings. Maria nodded. Now I can give my children a little more, and also, I would like to help others as you helped me. Andrés felt a lump in his throat. What he had learned in those days was more valuable than anything else. Faith is not a solitary path, but a journey that is walked in community, helping one another, trusting that God always has a plan. Father, what more can we do? Andrés asked enthusiastically. The priest placed a hand on his shoulder. Let's keep helping others. There are many people who need hope, and God has given us the mission to share it. Andrés smiled firmly. Then, let's walk together in hope. The days passed, and Andrés felt how his life began to change. His father started working with Don Esteban, who not only offered him a job, but also words of encouragement and friendship. His mother, thanks to Dona Isabel's help, was able to receive treatment and gradually began to regain strength. But the most surprising thing was what happened in Andrés's heart. Guided by Father Mateo, he began visiting more needy families in the village. Together with Maria and other volunteers, they organized small gatherings to share food, listen to those who suffered, and, above all, bring hope to those who believed everything was lost. One day, while walking through the cobblestone streets of the village, Andrés saw a young man sitting alone on a bench, with a lost look, just like he had been that afternoon by the river. He approached cautiously and sat beside him. "Are you all right?" he asked kindly. The young man took a while to respond, but finally sighed. "I don't know. I feel like my life has no meaning." Andrés recognized that feeling. He smiled with understanding and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to walk alone. Come with me. Let's walk together in hope." The young man looked at him with doubt, but in Andrés's eyes, he saw something that made him nod. Just as Father Mateo had guided him, now it was his turn to reach out to someone else. Andrés understood that hope was not just for him, but for everyone who was willing to receive it. And so, with a heart full of faith, he moved forward, trusting that God would always be with them, guiding them every step of the way.